Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue 139, The Black Knight, Dane Whitman. But Anthony, I thought you were doing Donna Troy this week. That's for next week. Looking at the calendar, I realized, hey, Eternals comes out this week. We should probably cover one of those characters, synergy and all that. And so I was looking at some of the cast list and I said, I don't know the Eternals. I've never read anything with the Eternals, but I have read the Avengers, and we just did Crystal not that long ago, and she had a dalliance with Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, who, as you will come to find out, has a litany of issues to deal with. So I said, let's interject this one real quick. We'll get to Donna Troy momentarily. Also, just wanted to give you a heads up that for those of you longtime fans know, we like to take our holiday hiatus. So during the month of December, there will be no episodes coming out. So you can take that time to catch up on other shows, or if you're fairly new to the series and you're fairly new to the show, like John Morgan, who just joined our Facebook group not that long ago. He said he's been catching up and binging the show the last couple of weeks. Welcome, John Morgan, and thanks for your support. This will give you an opportunity to go back through the back catalog and check out those older episodes, some of which we're kind of embarrassed by. Okay, we're not really embarrassed, but I'd like to do some of them over.
Yeah. I mean,
knowing now what we know, or, you know, if we knew then what we know now,
exactly,
they'd be a little different. But in any case, so there will be no episodes for the month of December. We'll also pause the Patreon. So we're not going to charge you because we won't really be coming out with stuff, but we'll be doing some stuff behind the scenes, and we will be back in January with season 7. Holy smoke, Bullwinkle, season 7. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Season 7.
Ooh.
So, but we still got a couple episodes left to go before we hit that break. So let's do this one then. Dane Whitman, created by Roy Thomas and John Buscema in Avengers number 47, December of 1967. So Dane Whitman, and this is going to give you a little bit of comic history here. Dane Whitman is the nephew of Nathan Garrett, who is a descendant of Sir Percy of Scandia, who served in the court of King Arthur as the Black Knight and was bestowed with the sword known as the Ebony Blade, which was carved from a meteorite and only to be wielded by the most honorable of knights. So Sir Percy was the title character in The Black Knight, which was an Atlas Comics series in the mid-50s written by Stan Lee. Then when Atlas became Marvel, it then transitioned to Nathan Garrett, who was a descendant of Sir Percy, except he decided to use the Ebony Blade for evil, not good, and became a villainous version. On his deathbed, he renounced his life and told his nephew Dane to take up the sword and restore the family legacy. This was in a previous Avengers title. And so after initially being mistaken for his villainous uncle, he later joins the Avengers and then the Defenders. While serving with the Avengers, he discovers the Ebony Blade is cursed. The more blood is shed with it, the more its wielder becomes insane. So after battling Morgan Le Fay and Mordred, Sir Percy's spirit merges with the blade, and that cancels the curse. So he then becomes romantically involved with Crystal and Cersei, and you can go back a couple of weeks and listen to our episode on Crystal for a little bit more on that love quadrangle there. So he's attracted to both, but in an effort to save Cersei from an intergalactic illness, Dane is unwillingly bonded to Cersei in a merger called the Ganjosin. The bond is broken during a battle with alternate dimension versions of the Avengers, led by Proctor, a Dane Whitman from another world, who was rejected by the Cersei of his universe and now travels the multiverse, killing every version of her that he can find. A Watcher creates an alternate reality where Cersei can be free of the curse, and Dane goes with her over guilt of his actions.
Hashtag because comics. So I was waiting because I was like, oh, this is the hashtag. Nope, this might be the hashtag. Oh, never mind. The entire
No, it's the whole damn thing. It's this whole damn section is hashtag because comics. So meanwhile, because he's a knight, he has a squire, Sean Dolan. So while this is all going on and he goes off, Sean Dolan gets the Ebony Blade and he becomes the villain known as Bloodwraith, which is kind of a badass name, not going to lie. So Dane and Cersei are then sent to the Ultraverse, which is home of Malibu Comics, because Marvel and Malibu Comics had a sort of merger, or at least a working agreement. And so there was some slight crossover of those characters from Marvel into the Malibu Comics world. So Dane ends up being the leader of Ultraforce. He attempts to return home, but ends up in the 12th century, where he battles Apocalypse and the mutant who would become Exodus. So upon returning to the 616 universe and current time, he joins the Heroes for Hire for a period. So then after killing the villain Carnivore with the Ebony Blade, he leaves for Weird World, but he is followed shortly thereafter by the Avengers Unity Squad, who want to bring him to justice. So Steve Rogers takes the blade from him, but it drives him mad. And only after battling a possessed Steve and regaining control does the team realize that Dane actually has more things under control than they initially believed. So then during the recent King in Black event, it's revealed that the Ebony Blade is actually an evil blade that amplifies the anger and insanity within its wielder. Merlin lied to Dane, who then realized all the times that he lost control and had initially blamed it on the curse of the blade were really his fault. So in the ongoing, or I believe it like literally just recently wrapped up, the Black Knight Curse of the Blade series, it's revealed that he had a daughter, Jax, who now shares the mantle of the Black Knight with him, because the two of them can split the burden of the Ebony Blade so that neither of them handles the madness alone. So, as I said, this is a character who's gone through quite a bit. And I have to say, all things considered, you know, we talk a lot on this show about how characters, when dealing with these kinds of things, are not always written in a intelligent or realistic manner, that a lot of these things are done for the sake of comedy or for drama, and that a lot of these things are hyped up. Obviously, taking aside the fact that there's no blade that can drive you mad and so on and so forth, the way in which Dane grapples with the burden that he deals with of the legacy, and we're going to get into that, as well as, you know, being a hero and all these other things, I think he's got a lot more together than he would have the right to. Like, you could forgive him if he were a lot more unraveled. But again, all things considered, and this is fairly consistent over the period in which he's a major character in a lot of these books, that he's written as he's teetering at times, but he never really full blown loses it unless it's revealed to be the cause of the blade and so on. So we're going to get into the issues now. And the first thing I want to talk about is that in some cases, the way it's written, and depending again on how you want to look at it, he's an addict. He is addicted to the blade. And this is one of the things that recently came up when the Avengers took the blade from him. He was basically going through withdrawals because he said, I need it. You can't control it. You can't handle it like I can. I need the blade. And in essence, it defines him. It's not just because it's passed down through his ancestors. It's because it defines who he is as a hero, that he is known as the wielder of the Ebony Blade. And he's got a winged horse, Aragorn, and there's a couple other things that really play up into the mythology of knighthood and so on and so forth. But the blade is the really one recurring thing that has withstood the test of time over the past 50-something years that he's been around. So the addiction that he has to this weapon, for good or for bad, takes its toll on him.
Yeah. And I like this topic because it's a spin on something that I know we've talked about before. We have dealt with addiction, specifically substance problems, many times. Addiction could take many forms, and it doesn't have to be substances. But even if that's the case, I'm going to go with something that's incredibly common with what I see in a hospital setting. Let's say you are an average person, been living your life with your regular job, with your family, and things are going okay, but you've had a bit of a downturn. And you see someone in the mental health care setting, and they, while they're reviewing your case, notice, you seem to be taking a lot of stimulants. Like, you've been on methylphenidate and a few other variations of that. And I've noticed that your entire demeanor is starting to change. You're not doing as well as you used to. Oh boy, the amount of defensiveness I get from patients in those settings, it's fascinating because it's an instant reaction. You're not taking away my medication. You know fully well that I need this medication to focus. I need this to work. I need this to be human. And the idea that you're saying it's a problem puts everything directly in conflict. The idea that the thing that you're using as a treatment or something that is beneficial on one hand, either because of side effects or because of just in general what it does over time, is starting to adversely affect you, the person may become completely blind to that. And if that's the case, you're going to have a battle on your hands. And I know in this case, we can just go ahead and say it's not even a metaphor, like it's a sword. But the point remains that you feel like you're using this thing as a prop to allow you to function in the world the way other people expect you to, and with the expectations that you placed on yourself, which I know we're going to get into later. And someone else is trying now to dictate or point out what they consider to be a flaw. And just to make it clear, many doctors, including myself, we get defensive about this because we've seen, and it doesn't have to be stimulants. I just use that as one example. It could be pain medication. If you say, well, look, I don't abuse it. I take the exact amount that I'm supposed to every day. That may very well be the case. And it may not be a problem. And we're just projecting ourselves as doctors. That's also a possibility. We have to be aware of that. But if we're getting the feedback that your behavior has changed, or your ability to sleep, your ability to eat, your ability to complete your tasks at work, your own expectations for yourself, your mood has changed, all of those things. If we're noticing all of that and we don't have another explanation for it, guess what? We're going to come down to the most likely cause. And just even grappling with the fact that you now are in a world that you didn't create, at least not on your own, and actually may have been the responsibility of someone else to help guide. And now all of that is starting to shift in a way you never expected. Like, this is supposed to be a problem that was already taken care of. So in Dane's case, hey, I got this blade. I'm a knight. I'm going to fight bad guys. I'm going to do good and win. That's supposed to be it. And now it's a curse. Well, okay, that's horrible, but I can deal with it. I've been dealing with it. And other people are saying, oh, yeah, but it's not as good as you think. So the criticism of your own behavior and not recognizing it for yourself, the actual physical effects in addition to that either you have been willing to tolerate. That's the other thing. Even if the person knows, let's go back to stimulants or things like that, or the pain medication, which can cause nausea or sedation or a whole host of other physical things. And you're basically saying, well, I can just power through it. I can deal with it. Well, maybe not at the level you used to. All of these external invalidations, that's painful. And the idea that you've now incorporated it into your personality is just as harmful as any of those physical effects themselves. So you've got a really difficult road ahead of you if you're on this path.
Yeah, that's something that I don't know how often it gets taken into consideration, or at least how often I've seen it as part of the discussions. I'm sure you have, the notion of the discrepancy between how I feel like I'm handling it and the external thing. I feel like that only really gets brought up in the context of like an intervention, or when someone is very clearly very far gone with the addiction, but it's a spectrum, like you said. And it can be a situation where somebody says, no, I'm managing this the way that I'm supposed to, but the external perceptions may be slightly different. And that also plays into how others view us versus how we view ourselves, irrespective of medication, things of that nature. But I don't know how often I've heard that topic brought up within the context of addiction consistently enough. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, as we go through these discussions, not just for Dane, but for people in general. We're still dealing with the opioid crisis and things of that nature. And I know you dealing with where you work, you see that a lot.
Yeah. And also, I'm going to take it a little different way because once again, people still point out, I'm sure, and by people, I mean me. Well, Doc, you're still talking about substances. You said that there are other things beyond that. And I can give direct examples. If, for whatever reason, you have noticed, maybe it's a substitution. You used to be addicted to substances, but now you found healthier alternatives. You now work out a lot. And Anthony, I know you've mentioned your own family and people you know that have made very positive changes in their life, and that's wonderful. But let's go ahead, even if you took the substance part out of it, if someone is doing great with their workout routine, but then all of a sudden family notices that they didn't just lose the weight they expected to lose or wanted to lose, now it looks like they're almost underweight. Now there's questions as to whether or not this person is even eating full meals at a time, and they're not doing it in a intermittent fasting way or things like that, working with a nutritionist. They're just literally looking like they're starving themselves.
I was going to say the other thing is, in that case, you go from using illegal substances, now you're exercising, but now you're taking steroids because now you become addicted to the appearance and the size. And so now you've replaced...
Right. I agree with you. Either way, though, it's basically a dysmorphia or an eating disorder or...
Yes, dysmorphia, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Or steroid direct abuse, which is its own substance problem. Or you have created a hobby for yourself and now you're spending excessive amounts of money on those things that your family's saying, you're about to bankrupt us. What are you doing? And you can't see that for yourself. And you're now gambling, trying to get things back. There are so many variations on what
this could take. So I shouldn't be spending $25,000 on building a podcast studio in the basement. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, considering you have the ultimate bailout person with you, I don't want to confirm or deny that statement. But anyway, no, I mean, the whole point is I really do want to expand it above and beyond substances. Just the idea that you can take many different things in life to an extreme to the point that it becomes your obsessive focus, and it is to your detriment even if you don't see it. And like I said, that lack of validation from others, it can be painful. And I recognize that it may not always be totally accurate, but it should at least be on your radar, especially if it's people that do know and care about you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the things we talk about on the show all the time is self-awareness and mindfulness. And it's not just knowing yourself. It's also being at least aware of how you're perceived by others. And not to say that you should cater to them or their perceptions of you or anyone else's idea of who you are, because you just lose yourself that way. But you have to know how others perceive you. And if there's that much of a discrepancy there from people that are confidants, that are close to you and know you and love you and care about you, if there's a discrepancy there, that's at least worth considering. If it's one thing, if a stranger's like, hey, you seem off, whatever, you can sort of dismiss them. But if I was going through stuff and if you were to tell me, hey, listen, I've noticed you've been kind of off lately, whatever, like, I'm going to take that into consideration, or if my wife or my family members, whatever, if they tell me, hey, you seem a little off lately, something's been going on, I'm worried about you, that's something to take into consideration. So for Dane, he's got the Avengers there, but because of who he is as a character, and also just the fact that he's been kind of a, dare I say it, a B-lister at best, he doesn't often get that close camaraderie that's expected of other more mainline characters. That yes, he has the tenure, but he doesn't have that real close connection with a lot of these characters. And so that's why, Steve in the 2015 solo series, Steve is like, hey, listen, we've been through a lot together and stuff. And Dane is kind of dismissive of that because, like I said, he has been an Avenger, but he's not one of the big names. And so I don't know that he has too many people around him close enough to be able to say, hey, I'm a little worried about you. Whereas if it's coming from some of his Avengers teammates, he's like, yeah, but you don't really know me like that kind of deal. So like I said, that's been written into the character, and I think has been very well done. So the next issue then, and this is something that really comes into play during the King in Black, is the guilt over how much of his actions were his doing versus the blade. And even prior to King in Black, when the Ebony Curse was established and so on, there was always this struggle that he was dealing with, was how much was what he was trying to do and do good versus this blade that was cursed and making him do these horrible things. And that grappling that he was constantly struggling with, that really took its toll on him as well, in addition to the addiction, because again, it's part and parcel with it that he's addicted to this blade that's making him do these terrible things, even though he wants to do good with this horrible tool. So that's not an easy thing to live with.
Yeah, of course. So from that standpoint, everyone loves the idea, well, maybe not everyone, but most people love the idea of autonomy, the idea that you are under control of yourself and your actions, which also means you have to take responsibility for the consequences. Alongside that, I'd like to think that as adults, we all recognize that we do not have control of everything around us. And so we are always in a struggle to maintain the balance between that autonomy and knowing that we have to take charge versus basically letting things go that are outside of our purview. It's that entire idea of locus of control, which I know I've talked about so many times. But what happens when there's one direct stimulus? And once again, I know the blade is the thing that we're talking about because of all of the metaphorical things that represents and how it directly impacts the character. But that can be, as we've already mentioned, that could be a substance. It could be something that you're incredibly focused on in your life. It could genuinely be something that is outside of your control, or more importantly, is trying to control you. If you have people that are domineering in your life, if you have people that you think, and once again, I apologize because this may sound harsh to some people, you think that this other person has a significant amount of control even when they don't. You've given that agency to this other person to control parts of your life. I know some people have this experience at work. I know some people have this experience in their own household. And I'm actually separating this out from the idea of direct abuse. I'm not referencing that. That's a different thing. And if that's going on, then yes, a person needs assistance. They need help because they really are in a situation where they cannot advocate for themselves. That's different. I'm talking about the idea that your perception as to whether or not you can advocate for yourself, even if there is no outward sign of something that is malicious in intent, but it's simply, yes, sir, or yes, honey, or whatever you say. Yeah, I could do that. Once again, not to get too pejorative about it, but you're starting to feel for yourself that either you are just going through the motions and this is what's expected of you, and therefore you don't have to take direct responsibility for anything that happens. You can just say, well, that's what they told me to do. And there have been some very negative situations in society where too many people that do that leads to a very negative result, even if they're not fully conscious or aware of what those consequences may be, or even why they would be placed in a situation where they would have to do that. So this is some stuff that sounds benign at first because it's survivable indefinitely. You can live your life, honestly, the full way through that. I don't think that's ideal because you can be incredibly manipulated. And of course, the backlash from this, either from other people or for yourself, is that usually at some point, you or someone else is going to call you out. And when that happens, I can almost guarantee you there's going to be a very severe emotional response. It may be anger, it may be sadness, severe depression, and all the behaviors that go along with those emotions, especially if you've never had to deal with them before this. If you have always thought that for sure the path that you were taking because someone else either was telling you or you read something that was so impactful to you at a certain stage in life that it had you on this trajectory that was clearly the right thing, and yet at some point, either through your own experience or someone else points out a different variation of what you're doing or where you might be going with something. And once again, your world is completely changed again. Each of these as an opportunity for growth or stagnation or worse. I mean, just complete degradation of who you are as a human being. It doesn't have to be any of those things. It could be any of them. But one way or another, if you have externalized all of who you are, don't be surprised that people are going to give back variations that weren't what you expected because you pretty much left it to the whims of the world.
Yeah, you no longer have control over who you are. Don't be surprised if who you end up becoming isn't really all that great of a person. I think we see this a lot in adolescence because so many adolescents put such a premium on acceptance that they're willing to forego whatever identity that they have in order to be part of the clique, part of the group. And then they find themselves, and it doesn't necessarily even have to take very long. They find themselves in situations where they go, how did I end up here? And then you really have to backtrack and say, what were the decisions that led to me getting to this point? And then is this something that I want to continue? Or is this a situation where at some point a line should be drawn? I say should because it doesn't always, unfortunately, end up getting drawn. But at some point a line should be drawn to say, I don't want to go any further and I'm going to backtrack and really start to find myself. Not everybody makes those decisions. For somebody like Dane, I think he has at least a somewhat idea of where that line is. It's not always black and white, but he's got enough of an idea that when he starts to get to that point, he starts questioning how much of this is me, how much is the blade, and then where do I go from here? That's, I think, where he really struggles is he knows where that line is, but it's a question of what do I do now if I find myself close to or over the line? His decision-making at that point is questionable because he's under the influence of the blade, in theory, or at least he believed he was. And I think it gave him an out to be able to say, oh, it really wasn't me, it was the blade. And then as we find out recently, that wasn't always the case. So now he's really dealing with that. So I'd be very curious to see if that really gets followed up on in further stories. Again, I will fully confess, I haven't read the current ongoing, the one that just recently ended. I kind of, in the background, I gave the summary that I was able to surmise from the synopses of I think it's 5 books. So I haven't had an opportunity to read them, mostly because they're not all on Marvel Unlimited yet. And I didn't want to start reading them and then go, crap, what happens now? So I'll wait a couple of months until they're all done and then I'll give it a shot. But I'd be very curious, like I said, to see if that's something that's followed up on where he really starts dealing with that of, okay, now that I know this is all on me, how do I cope? So the last issue is, and this is something that we've talked about for several characters, is he's a legacy character. And in this instance, he's a legacy of heroes and villains. And so he's trying to undo the negativity and the villainy of his uncle, all while, quote unquote, failing in his own way. So he's very much making his own mistakes while trying to establish a better legacy for the Black Knight than the one that came before him. And that's something that we haven't, I don't know if we touched on this particular aspect, mostly because we're typically talking about either heroes taking over. We're usually talking about heroes taking over for heroes. This is heroes following up after a villain who's also kind of following up after a hero. So there's a long legacy there. And how does he branch off into his own thing?
So it's interesting that you phrased it that way, because when you describe it in that sense, from a literary standpoint and from a comic book standpoint, yes, that is absolutely unique. We don't see that as often. But if you expand it to human existence and the idea of family lineage and just looking at what your previous generations and your family did, this is no different than anybody else's personal history. In other words, everybody has generations before them that did things that we look back on and go, ooh, that's not a good look. But also, we have people where we say, wow, that person should be honored as a hero. I'm surprised nobody else knows about this when you do enough tracing back to who you are. So just constantly having this mix of experiences, both from the lens of what we consider to be quote unquote good or bad now versus what was considered good or bad in its own time. At least his uncle was willing to acknowledge on his deathbed, which, yes, is a common thing, that what he did was not the greatest and wanting the best for the world. I apologize. I know I'm going to go on a tangent here, but I'm just going to go with it because it's what's in my head. People, do your best not to do this. I respect the idea that you want to die with your soul clean. But in that case, can you get this done a little earlier rather than just trying to get this ultimate mulligan like at the very end? I really think that's a logical fallacy, but I'll end the digression there because I'm sure there's plenty of flame bait with that type of topic. And I know it has a lot to do with spirituality and things of the sort, which I think are genuinely a positive thing, but I think is getting absolutely bastardized and abused that way. To get back to the original point, there is no such thing as a blueprint for your life. Let me say that again. There is no such thing as a blueprint for your life. There's a blueprint for life. There's a way that many people can show you how to go about things and get certain results. I'm not denying that. You can read as many books, go to as many seminars, take as many classes, and listen to as many podcasts and stuff. By the way, keep listening to ours as you want. But ultimately, there's only one person that is ever going to be the architect of who you are and what you do from this point forward, and that's you. That's it. So the idea that other people that have similar traits and tendencies to you and have a biological connection, yes, makes it more likely that your paths are going to potentially have similarities. That's not a guarantee. We're basically talking about probabilities. And if you equate this, Anthony's going to be very familiar with this. If you equate this to every time you do a check with multi-sided die, then you're going to see what you roll. And there may be a fantastic chance that it's going to work out the way you expect it to, but there's also the off chance that it doesn't. And you know what? There's no reroll. These are each individual choices and decisions that happen, and you have to just incrementally work with each choice that you've made. You can compare and contrast all you want, and if it leaves you stuck, then maybe you should do it less. If you've never done it, maybe you should try so that you get better feedback. But either way, I apologize because I know I like to say things maybe twice, but I'm saying this a third time. There is no set blueprint for your life. The only person that is ever going to be able to create that is you. And guess what? Even if you already have, I guarantee you a week, a month, a year, a decade, and hey, if we ever figure it out a century from now, it's going to change. So the idea that this gentleman who has set up with a blade that in theory has part control over what he does, partly because he allows it and partly because it is powerful in and of itself. He's willing to do so many things that can do a lot of good in the world, but partly because of things he didn't know about what he was originally experiencing, as well as things that were told to him that were misleading, don't always work out the way that he would anticipate. He's willing to course correct. He has some negative things that happen that lead to emotional and, let's face it, like near psychotic situations in his own brain that start to hinder him, and yet still is willing to soldier on because he sees value in what he's doing. I know that's Dane, but that's a lot of people. That's really what life is all about. And if you're willing to embrace it for what it is, this vast and potentially unknown journey, then it can be absolutely beautiful. Or you can switch that lens and say that all of these things are conspiring around you, and it's making it an impossible struggle. It's that old saying, who was it, Ford, that said that? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. That's
maybe. But it's a truism regardless.
Yeah. So situations where you have family backgrounds or all these other things that you had no say in, be glad that you have a say in yourself. Please.
Well said. I don't have anything more to add to that. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we will get into treatment. So stay tuned. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your individual needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist. You can begin communicating within 48 hours.
It isn't a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp has a network of over 15,000 counselors with a broad range of expertise. You can log in and message your counselor anytime and get timely and thoughtful responses. You can also schedule regular video or phone sessions. No waiting room required.
BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if you feel you don't have a good connection. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial help is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/capes, that's better HELP, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional.
Special offer for Capes on the Couch fans. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/capes.
Hi, I'm Linda.
And I'm Jane.
And we have a brand new podcast called Bedknobs and Broomflicks, where we talk about witches of the entertainment world. From the horror movies Warlock, Suspiria, The Witch, and The Blair Witch Project,
to the more comedic or whimsical, such as Harry Potter, Hocus Pocus, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and The Blair Witch Project.
No movie, TV show, or book is off limits.
All witches, man witches, sorry warlocks, we're not calling you that, witches brews, witches of history, familiars, and witch-like activity will be discussed as we laugh and have fun talking about the wonderful world of witches.
So join us every other week for some fun witchy talk.
All witches welcome.
This is Philip Kennedy Johnson, and you're listening to Capes on the Couch.
And we're back. So in-universe treatment for Dane Whitman, keeping in mind that, he's very accustomed to the magical realm. Oh, okay. You've got an idea.
So for once, and the audience may be surprised with this, I came prepared, which also would surprise my employers. I'm joking. I'm joking, people. I have good ideas, but for in-universe treatment, I like to go off the beaten path. So once again, I am referencing something outside of the Marvel universe, and it's not even in the typical comic universe, but I'm going manga. Actually, it's not really, I didn't get introduced via manga. I got introduced via anime. Yu Yu Hakusho, which is based on the idea of a person who's in school, a bit of a, I don't want to say bully, but yeah, he's a real tough kid. He actually sacrifices his life to save someone and ends up dying because he got hit by a car. He pushed the kid out of the way. But the point is, as he's crossing what the equivalent is of the river Styx, he gets a chance to, get all these spiritual powers and things. That's not the character, though, that I'm talking about. I'm talking about his friend, who also is a bit of a tough guy and gets into a lot of fights at school, named Kurabara. The reason why I'm bringing him up, Kurabara is able to generate his spirit and create a sword. He manifests his own energy in a format that allows him to fight in a way that he understands. This whole time, we have been talking about how Dane is using a pre-existing external object that is starting to epitomize who he is. I'm saying that clearly, if we can find a way to focus it so that he's able to use who he is internally and externalize that so that he doesn't need this other sword, that would be the way to go. Because the less he relies on that other object and creates one of his own, then the more agency he's going to have in the world. And therefore, therefore he won't nearly have that much susceptibility to the things that the sword does in terms of driving him insane.
Okay. All right. Now, I wonder whether or not that substitution would be sufficient to address all of the issues, or if it would just be a substitution and the addiction mindset of, okay, he's not doing cocaine anymore, but now he's smoking weed all the time or whatever. So
I hear what you're saying, but that's why I'm pointing out, because yes, I'll still keep with that character, Kurabara. When he first starts doing this, he's using a stick. He's holding it in his hand, and he's able to generate the sword just from the impetus of carrying a stick that the energy can feed off of. But eventually, he doesn't need the stick anymore. He just generates it of his own will. And actually, he can dual wield. He can do, come on, it's anime. It's cool. But the point being, yes, you start off that way, but it doesn't just stay there. You're continuing to develop yourself and your own way of how you handle things, not just with this one format that some people might view as a crutch. And to be perfectly honest, even if people view it as a crutch, it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want something that's incrementally better, or do you just want to stick with what's been giving problems in the first place? I'll take a baby step forward, even if you get stuck on that baby step, rather than just sticking where you are and complaining about it.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. Like I said, it was just when you started talking about the substitution, that is kind of where my brain immediately went to. So out of universe, then, we've got an addict, family legacy, supposed to be somebody dealing with a lot of stuff, though.
Yeah, that's a great point. And for some people, it's a chicken or egg situation. In other words, did you develop an addiction independent of anything else that was happening in your life? And now, let's say you have people that really are disappointed in you, and that's the reason why you're getting treatment. Or was it a situation where you had all of these external factors that, while very well-intentioned, started to become a burden to you, and subsequently you ended up turning to things that you became addicted to? I mean, it can work both ways, and I've definitely seen both. In either case, then once again, the good news is, as creative as I get on the in-universe side, for honesty's sake, it's not as creative on the reality side, because there really are formats for this. It's meeting the person where they are in terms of the addiction side. How bad is it? Do they need inpatient rehab or substance treatment? Can they do peer support? Can they do group meetings? Do they need medical assistance with their treatment, depending on what it is? If it's a non-substance addiction, is there a specialty treatment that even I can't do and I need to get them connected with a specific person? All those things need to be taken into account. And also, from the emotional side and from the rest of the psychological and mental health side, just how bad are things in terms of your day-to-day function? How are you doing with the mood symptoms? How are you doing if there is any evidence of, for example, substance-induced psychosis or substance-induced mood disorder? Is it still the primary thing versus, once again, going the other way? Was it the depression or a manic episode that you needed to recognize, but you were quote unquote self-medicating and you were looking to calm that down? In which case, then we go into the discussion of, well, actually, there are medications that can help with all of this that don't have the same habit-forming format. Or is it, once again, medication assistance that's ongoing? Meaning, for example, if someone is addicted to opiates and they actually need a buprenorphine or methadone program. And I don't say those pejoratively, by the way. I understand some people have that view of them, but at the same time, I've definitely had patients that have been very successful in that format. So I don't discriminate when it comes to that. It's not for everyone, and I don't automatically say that's for everyone. But for those that it helps, then it's a wonderful thing. In addition to that, what are the sequelae consequences with the social interactions in your life, with your work, all those things? And for example, is this a situation where you're going to need time away from work? Or is work what's keeping you going and keeping you functioning, so you don't want to miss work? And so you're really trying to figure out how to do this on the down low while maintaining your day-to-day activities. So all those things are definitely taken into consideration in one package, but the order of those formats, the location and setting of those formats, those are all the things that become variable. So the good news is, when you work with a healthcare professional, you are going to get a customized plan. There's no question about it. It's just that sometimes the different factors that come into play with that organized plan are things that people say, oh, I've heard that before. Well, yes, Yes, they're because they're true. So sometimes people get jaded, especially, for example, on the addiction side, if they've gone through this multiple times. I learned this from someone who's in our peer recovery system for my hospital network. And they pointed out, Doc, it's fascinating. The fifth IOP I went to was the one that worked for me. And I said, oh, that's great. What worked for you? I mean, was it a different person? Was it a different format? Like how they did their groups or what and he was very candid. He said, it was the first time I was actually willing to hear the message. And that was it. Every word was exactly the same. Format was the same. Doctor's medication was the same. For some reason, I don't know why it didn't happen the first 4 times. The 5th time it struck home. So sometimes it's not even a matter of trial and error. It's more like just recognizing that over time, in order to carve a pathway, a river may take centuries to form a canyon. So at some point, things will change if you're opening your mind to them.
Absolutely. And, as my mother always said, I've told you something 50 times. I'm going to tell you the 51st because maybe this time it'll stick. That's a little more lighthearted. But the truth is that we have to be ready to make the change. And you can't force someone to be ready to make the change that they need to. They have to be ready and willing to make it themselves. And I know in my own life, it's been very difficult sometimes because I want to help people. And I go, you just tweak. I'm not looking for wholesale change. I just say to them, if you could just tweak this little thing and I will help them and I will set them up for success, and they don't do it. And it took a while, but I had to stop internalizing that and stop blaming myself for the fact that they weren't ready for that change. It's not easy, but it's not your fault.
Right. I know it's not easy because what you just said is something that I know I need to hear once in a while. And that's something that I fully admit about myself, and people at work know that about me too. I fully admit that. Anytime I've actually given the recommendation to a patient or whatever, and I see that it's falling on deaf ears, I basically say, wow, how did I fail them so badly? And that's not fair to me. I know I should not say that to myself. And staff remind me of that. And I do incorporate that, and I do each time try to get better with it. So the fact that you said it as well, like I said, that means a lot. And thank you for that reminder.
We all need a reminder every once in a while. It's helpful. So with all that being said, let's see what happens when we get Dane Whitman on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Dane. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hi, Doc.
So what can I do for you?
Well, why do you waste your time with this fool? I cannot comprehend the magnitude of your burden.
Are you all right? You seem a bit distant.
Doc, schizophrenia is when you hear voices in your head, right?
Auditory hallucinations can be a symptom, although they're not exclusive to schizophrenia, nor are they present in every case of schizophrenia. What makes you bring that up?
Go on, tell him. Tell him you hear your great-great-granddad talk to you. Better yet, tell him you can see me. That'll help. Shut up.
I'm sorry. Are you?
No, not to you. You're doing great so far. It's my great-grandfather. I don't even know how many times over. Greater than you'll ever be at this rate.
Okay.
Let me start over. I have this sword. Oh, sure, blame the sword. Not the sword's fault your foppish twit who's in over your head. Keep it up, old man, and I'll find a way to bring you back to life just to cut off your head.
All right. I'm getting the idea that I'm definitely not the only person you're talking to here. Are you talking to the sword?
No, but the sword is the reason I'm talking to someone else.
Keep going.
Hey, I cannot wait to hear how you explain this. This sword is powerful. Bravo, hero. You're going to tell him it cuts things too.
For you to put so much stock in it, I'm sure it is. How does that connect to talking to someone else?
Well, if it weren't for my kin, I wouldn't have it.
Treasured heirloom of sorts. But there's more to it still, I'm guessing. I mean, any soldier... Any knight holds their weapon dear to them. You don't just keep it close, though. You're staring at it.
It's better than looking at his face. You know, I'd see through you, right? He's bonded with the sword, my ancestor. I know this sounds crazy.
I'd never say that.
Because he's blind to you, lad.
Is there anything that keeps you, I don't know, distracted so your stress doesn't overwhelm you?
I don't part with my duties. I have sworn to protect what's right. Attaboy.
Well, sometimes being away from something you cherish can give a person a fresh perspective.
I'm uniquely qualified to handle this particular weapon. That's not the problem. It's what happens when I let others get in my way. So you see now, it isn't how special you are. How special we are. This is a gift, lad.
Nobody is put on the earth to solely be your obstacle. Only circumstances and personal choices ever do that. I actually want to take the psychological journey with you, not against you.
I've fought alongside many. I'm not paranoid, just stressed.
I can see that.
If my mind's not right, I'll lose control. Believe me, nobody wants that. So take control.
So let go a bit.
What? This word of potions wants to weaken you. Too soft.
You're going to have to, I don't know, ration out or delegate your responsibilities. That's a tough thing to do in the short term, but you'll be able to redouble your efforts if you give yourself time to rest. Plus, the fact that you're still staring at the sword really concerns me.
Tell me, Doctor, do you think a man can do good things with dark intentions? What are you prattling on about?
I don't pretend to answer to hypotheticals, and it's a little scary.
It's not hypothetical. This sword feeds off of some things that I'd rather not talk about. Not even to a psychiatrist. I mean, when it works, oh man, does it work. I can slay any enemy. I can save people. But when things go bad, like I said, I don't want to talk about it.
Well, it's kind of my thing, so...
Keep going, and someone who would not be considered worthy of the court will know more than some of the sorcerers in my day. I can't. The point is, I don't want to go nuts. I don't need to be labeled insane. I have a lot of wrongs to right. And not just for me, for anybody who ever held the sword. My family. Does that part make sense?
Definitely.
You see? You only need yourself and that sword. I can still guide you.
From everything you've told me, I want to make an alliance. It's my own oath to help that compels me to make sure you remain fit to wield that thing. You know, honestly, a combination of talk therapy along with some medication management.
No apothecaries. I have a bit of trouble with that last part.
You or someone else?
You kind of know that. I'd rather not say.
I'll let you in on something. Your delays in your responses are a true giveaway that you have what we call internal stimuli. I'm not trying to judge that. But if you have to hesitate like that, where there's like a life and death situation and you have to make a significant decision, even if they're distracting you with positive ideas, you're going to falter. You know, I see it all the time. And if you don't take charge of this right now, then one of your fellow heroes or friends or family will try to protect you by whatever means necessary. And it really doesn't have to get to that point.
He means well, but he didn't know our kind. You don't make this easy.
Nothing over a sword ever is, right? I'm giving you a chance. I don't have a sword. I have a hand, if you're willing to shake.
Well, that was incisive, shall we say?
Yeah, I want to explain to the audience what was going on there. And it's different than the issues per se that we really were talking about because we went more the potential psychotic realm. The thing is, I want to make it clear that for anybody that actually has these experiences, this is not meant to shame or label you. This is just simply an opportunity to recognize that there are people trying to help make sure that you're having the best life possible. I know it can be scary to talk about these things with people that are complete strangers, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to live your best life. So go about it with an open mind and you get better results. That's pretty much the whole point of that skit, at least in my mind. I wanted to take that opportunity. That was not the original idea, but I thought it was just such a wonderful situation because I know we don't always talk about those other things, those other symptoms, those other things that people experience that really are true. and I don't want to minimize it. I want to recognize that they're there, and I want to let people know that it's okay. You know, you can still have a great life. Nobody's going to shame you about it, or at least they shouldn't.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So recommended reading is the 2015 Black Knight solo series. I think it does a good job of updating the character to the modern time while still retaining some of the characterization that had been established in the prior series. And again, also go back and read some of those 80s and early 90s Avengers titles where he was a primary member. Again, some of the stuff we talked about in the Crystal episode from a couple weeks ago, where that whole love quadrangle is going on, where he's basically the field leader, so to speak, of the Avengers. I think some of those older stories do a good job of giving him some solid characterization. So as we said at the top of the show, next couple episodes, and then we're going to take our holiday hiatus. So we've got Donna Troy, Homelander, and Polaris. So we've still got some really big names coming up and a lot of stuff that's going to be very fascinating to talk about. I'm really looking forward to Homelander. Matt gave us, as usual, a lengthy write-up. So looking forward to reading that. So you can find all of our episodes on our website, capesonthecouch.com. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. Please give us a follow and share the content if you so choose on the social media platform of your choosing. Also, again, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, and we'll read it out on the show. And then if you email us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com with a screen cap of that review and your address, we will send you a sticker as a way to say thank you. Because, as we always say, it's about getting in front of faces and ears. That's how we continue to grow the show. Lastly, I want to thank all of our patrons. You can go to patreon.com/capesonthecouch and subscribe at the $1, $3, and $5 levels. Unlock early access, additional content, uncensored material, bloopers, et cetera, et cetera. So again, many thanks to all of our patrons who we name checked in the last episode. We can't do the show without you. And last but not least, if you're in an area where you feel comfortable with it, maybe go check out the Eternals movie. I know some of the early reviews are coming out right now as we're recording this, and there's a lot of talk about, the Rotten Tomatoes score is the lowest in Thor: The Dark World and blah, 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 blah. I'm still interested in go see it. I'm going to talk to my wife. We'll get a babysitter for the little guy and we'll go check it out ourselves. And then, so make up your own mind and let us know how Dane does in the film. I know he's played by Kit Harington. We'll see whether he's a better Dane Whitman than he was a Jon Snow. But on that note, Doc,
on the internet, be it social media or forums, many people are familiar with the term white knighting. In all honesty, I hope that people continue with that because black knighting sounds way, way worse.
It truly does. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.